The interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. The veteran's name is Harold Gentry. He was born on August 30th, 1944. He served in Vietnam. He achieved the rank of captain, and we are recording this on January 18th, 2014. I am William Richter, and I am conducting the interview. No relation. Thank you, Mr. Gentry, for talking to us today.
Okay.
If you'd just like to talk briefly about growing up, where you were born, and your family.
Well, I was born in Carthage, Tennessee.
Okay.
And I'm the oldest. There were two of us, me and my brother, who's predeceased.
Okay.
But except for 1 year, I was raised and went to school in Middle Tennessee in Smith County.
Okay.
I graduated from Gordonsville High School in 1962. I went to Vanderbilt University and on an academic scholarship and majored in mathematics. I graduated in '66 and started teaching because I wanted to coach. And so I taught 1 year at Hendersonville Junior High School, and then my old high school football coach had gotten a job in South Carolina, and he called me up and wanted me to come over and help him coach. So that's how I got to South Carolina. And you know, during this time, the draft was still going on, and because I was teaching, I had a draft deferment. But I forgot who it was, but someone in Tennessee, some politician made the statement that there were entirely too many deferments. So the draft board in Tennessee, in their infinite wisdom, just did away with all deferments, and this was when you came up with your lottery number on when you were going to get drafted, and or the order that they were going to draft. And anyway, I remember I was at that time I was in Mullins, South Carolina, and I had to go get a pre-induction physical, and I did that at Fort Jackson.
Okay.
And but anyway, then they came out with the draft numbers, and it turned out that my draft number was 333, which meant that unless they were coming up over the beach, I probably wasn't going to get drafted. But I had always wanted to fly, and two of my best buddies in high school, one was a naval aviator, and the other one had started out in pilot training, but because of he had sinus problems. But anyway, and I was the superintendent and I were not seeing eye to eye at the time on some contract issues, and I just thought, well, I was single, and I'd always wanted to fly, so I took the written test, pilot training. You know, they'd show you a picture, and you had, were you, about to crash and burn, or what type of attitude you were in, and I passed that, and then I went ahead and I enlisted in the delayed enlistment program, and had my first flight physical was at Seward Air Force Base in in Tennessee, and well, most of the bases that I was in are no longer there. And I had figured, well, this was in 1969, and by then it was the deal in Vietnam was winding down. So I figured, well, pilot training was 53 weeks. I go through OTS. By the time I get my wings, it'll be over with. That's to be. Anyway, which was actually my flight physical was probably the first physical I ever really had. I had played football in high school, but my physical consisted of our family doctor asking me if I had been sick since the last time he'd seen me, anyway, I passed the physical and everything, and I got sworn in active duty January the 2nd of 1970.
Okay.
And I headed out to Lackland Air Force Base,
Okay.
where every Air Force person who's ever been in the Air Force goes to basic training.
Okay.
And got commissioned early April the 1st or something of 1970, and my pilot class was going to be at Craig Air Force Base in Selma, Alabama. 53 weeks, and so that was for the most part uneventful. We started out, literally the first time I'd ever been in a plane was my first ride, my first lesson in, it was they called it a T-41, but all it was a Cessna 172.
Okay.
And you got 30 hours, and I soloed on the something like the 4th flight or something. I'd had a grand total of about 6 hours in the air.
And that was
and my first solo, and by the grace of God, because I really didn't know what I was doing, but I got back down in one piece, and then we went from there to the T-37,
Okay.
Twin engine jet, and the thing about that, the difference between that and like in a car is on a car, if you push on the accelerator, you get an instantaneous reaction.
Right.
Particularly this one, there's a lag.
Okay.
So you had to anticipate, and then about halfway through the year, after about, I forgot how many, about 4 or 5 months, then you went into the T-38, which is if you've seen Top Gun, the bad guys in that were flying a version of the T-38.
Okay.
Supersonic, go Mach 1.2. At one point, it held the world's time to climb record. I mean, it was hot.
A fast
plane. I mean, it was fast. Because I remember doing a solo out back up at Fort Knox, and I requested a burner climb, and so I kept it. I remember as I'm taking my this was in the spring, and you had flocks of birds that were going back north.
Right.
And so I'm going down takeoff roll, and here comes a big flock of birds right over the runway, so I had to suck up the gear and keep it underneath, and so I was doing 500 knots at the end of the runway, and then
Wow.
pop on up, and you level off at 35,000 feet or something like that in about 60 seconds or so.
Wow.
And anyway, it got my wings in April of '71, and got my, big event is what plane you're going to fly. Well, I was going to be flying an EC-47, which is basically a old DC-3 Goonie bird, and I was going to go through that combat crew training at England Air Force Base in where was that? Alexandria, Louisiana, and which was only, I forgot, it wasn't very long at all.
Like 4 weeks.
About 4 weeks or so, and you're going from a plane that goes Mach 1.2 to a plane that you fly at 100 knots or 90 knots or something like that. Anyway, it was the plane I flew in Vietnam and everything, but it was a plane that I actually learned to fly because there was no of these modern frills at all. It was main strength and awkwardness. You had the only hydraulics you had was to lower and raise and lower the gear. Everything else was on cables.
Wow.
And I had a guy I flew with when I got transferred to Thailand was an old crop duster, and we would sit there and we would come in at 1,000 feet, and when the end of the runway dropped under, then we would bet to see if we could touch down in the first 1,000 feet of it, which was the people in the back of the plane weren't real happy when we did stuff like that. Because what you did is you just dropped everything and lowered a wing and kicked opposite rudder, and you just kind of slid through the air.
Wow.
And anyway, got through there, and then I went from there to Fairchild in Spokane, Washington for survival school. And then from there I went down San Francisco and left from Travis to we went from there from Travis to Wake Island. We refueled at Wake Island, and then we went into Clark. Well, we were going to go into Clark, but at that time the Filipinos were rioting and were on strike, and so we had to land at Subic Bay. And they had to put a simple, because we're going through jungle survival school, and so they, and by that time I'd been up 20-some, 30-some hours, and they were going to billet us in on a troop ship that was anchored there in Subic Bay. And we get on, load up, and we get on the ship, and I get my room. There were two of us in a room, but the thing I remembered, I had just gotten into the bed, and literally there was about that much space between the top of my face and the bunk above me. Anyway, I'm sitting there and just about to get relaxed, and then the announcement was made, all Air Force personnel report. Well, we had to load up on a 130 and go back over to Clark. And I was there for, it was only about a week or so, through jungle survival, and then I was originally scheduled to go to Phuket, which is right on the coast of South Vietnam, and I got a Twix, which is a military telegraph, and they changed my assignment from that to Da Nang. Well, I fly into Saigon, and to go back to my original plan was, well, by the time that I get my wings, it'll be over with. Well, I got my wings in April of '71. In July of '71, I was in downtown Saigon. Anyway, I got into Saigon, and all I had was this Twix, and I had to get myself to Da Nang. And so I hopped a ride on a 130 that was going in there, and I got in there at about 10 o'clock at night, and everything was blacked out, and you had helicopters were flying perimeters, dropping flares. No one knew I was coming. I finally got in touch with someone from my squadron that I was assigned to, because they didn't even know I was coming. Again, all I had was this Twix, a piece of paper saying I was. Anyway, I went to. I was there for about 3 months, and we flew our missions from Da Nang, and primarily we were all the way up to the DMZ. Because I remember there is a canal that basically divided, and it wasn't real wide at all, but there was a canal that divided North and South Vietnam, and there was this wooden bridge over this canal, and right in the middle there was a flag. I remember you could watch it, and I was in what they call gunfighter village. We were our squadron is billeted with in the same region as the F-4 pilots were. And then after about 3 months, I got transferred from that to Nakhon Phanom, Thailand, and I thought I'd died and gone to heaven, because the thing that I noticed about over in Thailand was there was grass. In Da Nang, they had problems getting. Every now and then they'd run out of rations, and you'd wind up eating sea rations instead of, in Thailand. If you wanted to, you could get a steak. There was a nice French restaurant in downtown NKP. Now,
you also had the bear.
Oh yeah, well, we shared a hooch with the Jolly Greens, and they had a Malaysian sun bear as a mascot. And they'd let him out every now and then, and you would see him go into the post office in one end, and you'd see all the people running out the other end.
So they had one of these with them, just.
Oh yeah, they'd let him. He was the mascot, and
Like to drink.
you would be sitting. Yeah, he liked to drink beer, but I weren't paying any attention, and they're not very big. So supposedly they're dangerous, but I remember one time I was over there in our barracks, and all of a sudden something grabbed me around the leg, and he had grabbed a hold of my leg and was just
hanging on.
He wasn't trying to bite or anything like that, but flew most of my missions there were in northern Laos,
Okay.
Most of them were in northern Laos and around the Planet Jars. Occasionally we would fly down over in Cambodia and everything, but NKP is on the Mekong River,
Mm-hmm.
and I was told that it was a Viet Cong R&R center. Every base in Thailand was hit by sappers except for NKP. And the thing that was unique about the base was that there wasn't, it looked like a refugee from World War II because all of the planes there were propped.
Wow.
You had the AC-119s, you had OV-10s, which were the forward air controllers. You had the A-1Es. Well, we didn't have any jets until one night. Two MiG-21s came right down the center line of the trail, right down the runway. And the next day we had two F-4s sitting there on alert.
Yeah.
But we had 7-hour missions, and again, what we were doing was triangling, locating targets.
Okay.
But every now and then you hear them come over and B-52 strikes where they give you the coordinates and stay away from this place but anyway, I flew at that time. I think I believe it was 119 combat missions between Da Nang and NKP. And then I returned, and then I got my orders, and I was going to be flying the KC-135.
Okay.
So I go back to the States, and in the meantime, during this time,
Mm-hmm.
I got married on R&R, and I had, in my R&R time, I had flown back from Thailand
Mm-hmm.
to Tennessee and got married, and then came back, and I was going to be stationed in Blytheville, Arkansas. My wife has a cousin who was a dentist, and he went in because he was a dentist, he went in as a major, but he was talking about how he'd enjoyed, and he had started out in San Antonio, and then he had gone to Colorado Springs, he'd gone to Miami and Homestead, he had gone to Hawaii. Me, on the other hand, gone to Selma, Alabama, Blytheville, Arkansas. Not quite as an exotic a place, but then I went out to Merced to Castle
Mm-hmm.
for combat crew training in the 135, and then after that was about 4 months, 3 or 4 months,
Mm-hmm.
and then came back to Blytheville, and at the time, we're still flying. We were still involved with Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
and so I went back from TDY for 3 months to Okinawa, and from out of Okinawa we would fly, and we would refuel B-52s
Mhm.
going into hitting Hanoi and Haiphong. And then I also, while I was there, I pulled a week of strip alert there in Guam,
Mhm.
same place as the B-52s.
Mhm.
The in case, well, we had to launch one time.
Mhm.
B-52 come back shot up, and we would launch and refuel them to get them enough fuel to get back in.
Okay.
And then came back, and then we started pulling. This was right after I got back from Okinawa.
Mhm.
This was in '73, and we had started to pull. Well, we weren't doing alert yet because all of our B-52s there were still in Guam. But we would, one night, I forgot whether it was 1 or 2 in the morning, we got a recall. Now, they would do practice recalls, but normally they would do them like 6 o'clock in the morning,
Mhm.
so that you would get a decent night's sleep. But this one was 1 or 2 in the morning, so I show up, and we all got to the squadron headquarters there, and our squadron commander comes in, and he says, I don't know what's going on, but this is not a practice, this is the real thing.
Mhm.
And that was the time when I called her up and said, and we're literally, and we're there all night, and we still don't know what's going on.
Mhm.
And
He said, turn on the Today Show and see why we're here.
I called her up and turn on the Today Show and find out what's going, what has happened in the world.
That's affecting you.
Right,
to
so
this
that we get
recall.
called out.
Right.
And it was the 1973 Yom Kippur War with Israel.
Mhm.
And in the process, see, we didn't have any B-52s there. They were all in Guam. And in the process of 24 hours, they brought all the B-52s back from Guam. They cut off the racks. The conventional racks are different from the ones you hang nukes on.
Okay.
So they had to cut them off. And in 24 hours, they brought them back, and they were sitting out there with nukes hanging on them.
Wow.
And we went to DEFCON 3 at that time. After a day or so, we all went home. And then we started pulling alert. Cold War's still going on. I know we had to be in the air from the time the klaxon went off. We had 5 minutes to get in the air.
Wow.
And 5 minutes to start engines.
Mhm.
And had to pull alert there, or then we had satellite alert, and we pulled satellite alert at Whiteman Air Force Base, which is in Noster, Missouri. Another scenic spot is southeast of Kansas City, but
Okay.
Whiteman is where the B-2s are now.
Okay.
But anyway, every 3 weeks or so, it turned out about every third week I was on alert, whether I was on alert there in Blytheville or on alert up there in Whiteman. And then, you practice going to war. Most of our missions were 7-hour missions. We would take off. We'd always do a refueling.
Mhm.
Sometimes we would refuel fighters. I remember my first ride as an aircraft commander. I drug a bunch of A-7s to Panama and back, and we probably the scariest thing that we ever did, or was we would practice every so often minimal ventral takeoff, which is every 15 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And both the B-52 and the 135 had water injection. And what that does is that creates it gives you the denser air, and you're able to get more thrust and everything, but it also creates a whole bunch of black smoke.
Mm-hmm.
And you take off, and you're heading, you line it up, go down the runway, and you can't see a thing. And then you got all the turbulence and everything from all the planes. The B-52s always went first.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went, we'd take off, and then we would always try to get upwind to, one, to get out of the turbulence, and two, to where you could see.
Mm-hmm.
And then shortly, at one time I was scheduled to go to Shemya, which is, if you look at the Aleutian Islands
Mm-hmm.
and go all the way to the end, there's Shemya. And we were going to be refueling RC-135 that were flying up and down the eastern coast of Russia.
Almost like they were patrolling.
Yeah, I mean, they'd go down there, but they'd fly an orbit
Mm-hmm.
back and forth. And it got canceled, and I got sent to Torrejon, Spain, which is Madrid,
Mm-hmm.
for a month. And
You were real busy on that one, and the reason was.
well, yeah,
Your
we wore scarves, except, on when I'm assuming that was it, because Stanboard, the people who did all the check rides and make sure everything you were flying according to the rules and everything, always wore white scarves. Well, our particular squadron, that was the color of their scarves. Like, for instance, the B-52 people, I believe, wore green. But anyway, we had, and I think they thought I was a Stanboard pilot. Anyway, I flew more in that 1 month than most people fly in a year. I was flying just about every day.
Wow.
And one night I was refueling, and an old colonel who was flying a desk, but he needed to get his 4 hours in, and we were refueling it was an F4, and we hooked up fine. And as soon as we got hooked up, he kind of rotated and moved right in, and he got so close that he cracked the eye shield on the back of the plane.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Sure.
there, he got up into that, and
Wow.
I knew it was for real, because you always do the practice breakaway.
Okay.
But my boomer operator, he's back there. He's laying on his stomach on a pallet that looks kind of like that table there, and he's flying a boom down.
Mm-hmm.
And your procedure is, breakaway, breakaway, breakaway. Well, his last breakaway was a high-pitched scream. And I pushed up and overloaded, overstressed the engines, but try to get from getting hit.
Mm-hmm.
And coming back, and then I know that my last mission over there, I refueled a C5, which at that time was one of the largest, and it still
Big
is, large. Look what they were doing, they were taking F5s to the Shah or Iran. That was before the Shah had fallen, and you had, because of the bow wave on the thing, as you come in, the bow wave off of the C5 would kick the tail up on your plane, and so you had to do the refueling manually. You couldn't do it with the autopilot on. And I offloaded 150,000 pounds of fuel, and we were coming right through the Straits of Gibraltar, and then I'm scheduled to come back on December the 24th, and this is before GPS and everything, and I'm getting ready to fly back, and normally when we'd flown over, you fly at night because your navigators, in order to you have to be able to shoot the stars.
Right.
But we were going to do this in the daytime, and they brought a black box. It was about that long, about that wide, and about that high. And they set it right down in the middle of the cargo, and then they put an instrument on the navigators, and that was, and what you had to do, it was a precursor of the GPSs and everything. But the thing, you had to tell it where you were to get to initially.
To start with. Okay.
To get it start with. Well, so we're sitting there and getting cranked up, and we call into command center there for our coordinates, and we put the coordinates in, and the thing says, no, that's not right. And what they had done is they'd given us the coordinates of the plane that was right over in front of me. You know, and I'm thinking, okay, if the thing knows so smart that it knows that you put the wrong ones in, why doesn't it just know where you are without having to tell it? But anyway, we came back, and then I flew into Peace in New Hampshire, and went through, and then refueled, and I went in to get my weather briefing, and the guys there says, right now it's socked in, but by the time you get there, it'll have cleared out and you won't have any problems. And so I tell my flight engineer how much fuel I wanted to unload, because you always have to give an alternate. My alternate was Milliken, which is north of Memphis. It was a naval air station there.
Okay.
And Blytheville is only about 60, 70 miles north of Memphis. Blytheville is about 4 or 5 miles from the Mississippi River, and the end of the runway almost literally was on the Missouri line. I mean, we were up in the extreme northeast corner. And so Milliken wasn't that far. It was only about a 10-minute hop on the plane, if that much. And we're coming back, and I know that the minimums that we were allowed to fly was 100 feet and quarter-mile visibility. And we're coming down, and it's socked in. And based upon what the weatherman told me, the closest base that was not socked in was in Texas. I didn't have enough fuel to get to Texas. And so I'm coming down and we're flying the approach, and it wasn't rough, but it was just foggy, soupy,
Mm-hmm.
and coming down, and I had a ground control approach, the GCA approach coming in, where they're telling you on glass slope, left of, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to 100 feet above the ground, and all I am is I'm in the middle of a cloud, and keeping on down, and I literally didn't see the ground until we're over the runway, and I figured that probably the ceiling was less than 50 feet, and the visibility was nowhere close to. Well, it was so bad that once I touched down, they immediately closed the base, and they on the runway they brought a follow me out, so for me to follow back because it was so foggy,
You couldn't see where
I couldn't see where I was going, and
But they were trying to give them a chance to get back
Because it
home.
was Christmas, it
was
was-
next day.
and anyway, got back, and then they were winding down. Vietnam was over with, and I'd already put in my paperwork to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And so the last 18 months, I was in charge of all of the recreational facilities on base. There were 16 of them there on base. The bowling alley, the O Club, the NCO Club, the Airman,
Mhm.
golf course, all of that stuff. And then I got separated and came and moved back to, at that time, to Tennessee.
Okay. And would you like to talk about what you did after the military as well?
Well, the first year out, I was back where close to my hometown. It was only 30 miles away, and it was my wife Betty's hometown, and was selling stocks and bonds and insurance and that type of thing, but didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back to teaching and coaching,
Mm-hmm.
and moved back to South Carolina in 78.
Yeah. And we moved up
78.
here in 81.
And I was down in Mullins, South Carolina, until 81, and then in 81 moved up to Spartanburg, and I was teaching and coaching in at Broome High School here in Spartanburg, and I was here for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
I wound up the last 20 years I taught AP Calculus, Pre-Cal Honors, Statistics,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd gotten out of coaching in
2000.
2000,
Mm-hmm.
but let's see, this is 2013, 12, 11, 10, 2009,
Thereabouts, yeah.
a guy, I still had the itch to coach,
Mm-hmm.
and a guy that I had taught and coached, and my son got a job in Greenville County, and so at that time I was still teaching here, and then I was going over and coaching football there, and then I finally got out of teaching 3 years ago, and they have we were there for 3 years, and then now they've got the job up in northern part of the county in Chapman, and we just finished our second year there. In the 20 years that I taught calculus, only 2 times in the 20 years did I have less than 80% pass rate. And and then they still let me hang on. I'm still coaching and everything, but I haven't taught. And every now and then I'll do a little consulting work or something. As a matter of fact, last night they were talking about doing some type of vertical alignment or something with curriculum and stuff. But
Okay.
I've been lucky. Where I was, for instance, the barracks that I was in Da Nang took a direct hit from a rocket. I heard that the guy that replaced me, anyway, I know that right after I left over there, plane, it was Baron 5-2 was the call sign, but it got shot down. They think it was shot down. Right after I was in Guam. Guam, the Anderson, it's a bowl shape. It's a saucer shape. If you're standing on one end, it dips in the middle, and literally the plane will disappear, and then it will appear going and off. And there's a 400-foot cliff off one end of the runway, and a plane. As a matter of fact, it was a 135. Was coming back, landing, and came in low. Hit that cliff, and the island didn't move. And then right after, I was in Spain for a month, and the approach to Madrid is it's kind of scary, because Madrid is sits in a bowl, mountains surrounded, and what you do is you sit there and you come in and you orbit right over the base, and then you start descending, and it's a real steep descent, at least for the military. I'm pretty sure the civilians don't have to do that, but it basically, you pull the power back, drop the wing, flaps and everything, and you start down, and then you gotta turn before you get to them, and then there's a plateau, and so you come down, and then you gotta flatten, and then you gotta descend and land in.
Wow.
And there was a 141 that didn't flatten out after they made that turn and hit that plateau, that mesa out there, and ding. So, and that was right after I had left over there. So, there were 3 or 4 instances where I it could have been me. I didn't realize it, but she had never said a word while I was flying, but my wife was, I think she was glad that I didn't fly anymore.
Well, you didn't realize that I would lay awake till I heard the safe takeoff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to talk about?
Not really.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much for your service, sir. All right.